to give it 2, 3, 4 or 5 minutes to let people get on as well.
Yeah. Right.
So presumably we'll see people appear on the chat, will we?
Not in. We won't in this, but I will on here. Yeah. Okay. I just need to mute that though. Mute.
Anyone putting this on the forum?
Yeah, I'll do it in a sec. What do I need to mute though? I need to mute that.
Can you edit this for when it goes online, Gav?
No. I mean, technically it's live now, but
yeah,
there's 2 people watching, which one of them's me. But I'll just be someone random. I just need to check if people can hear. But I'll just be someone random. I just need to check if people can hear. Yeah, right. I think we're live, to be fair now, but I'll just post it on the Zip forum. And I can hear a bit of echo, so that's what I needed to. I think we're live, to be fair now, but I'll just post it on the Zip forum. See if that helps. What's the name? What's the forum? The forum's not loading, it's crashed. People are too excited. Oh, there we go. Can anyone get on the forum?
No.
Let me try.
You've broken the forum.
Yes, I can now. So you're going to post it in the header and on the next thing on next one on a thread, effectively post it twice.
Yeah, the forum's gone down because there's too many people on it.
That's because you're so tight and don't pay for any reasonable bandwidth.
Well, this is good, isn't it? Oh, I'm on. We're in.
We'll need to bear in mind that it might be a bit slow for other people too, though. So I think we need to give it a few minutes.
Thought you died, Jono, someone's saying.
I'm back.
We're not lucky. Not that lucky.
Still around, still hanging around.
You got any tips, mate? This is going so slow.
I still can't get on the forum.
Yeah, gateway timeout. Yeah. So I'm going to come out completely. I'll be one less person.
Honestly, the thousands of lurkers are just crushing me.
That's what's happened, isn't it? It's the lurkers.
Yeah.
Russian robots.
How many people can get onto the chat? Is there a limit?
There's 33 people watching at the moment.
Oh, so you've actually got the link loaded?
I'm watching us on YouTube.
They're watching us now, gripping stuff.
So
yet another professional. Can't get on. Can't post a link. It's not happening. Oh, Jacko's found it. What a guy. Yes. Right. The link's just about to go in, although...
How does that happen? We got your stupid picture, Kev, as the
What do you mean?
So that's what comes up on the link.
It's probably what there's only 33 people there. The only ones that were brave enough to behind the picture.
The mighty neon wolf.
It's telling me to contact the site administrator. So what are you going to do about it?
I don't know who the site administrator is. Oh yeah, people can hear us. Okay, cool. But can't see us. Oh yeah, people can see it. John, it's just you moron. People can see and hear. Although,
I'm guessing you'll know when the link's posted properly because you see the numbers of people joining come on, won't you?
yeah, we're up to 74. Oh, here we go. Oh, people can chat in here. I don't even need YouTube up. Can you see the chat in StreamYard, Johnny?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't for some reason.
Can you toggle between private chat and comments? Cool. On the right hand side.
Right, the link's posted in the forum now, so
Okay.
my job is done. Too used to believe.
Good to see some familiar faces on the chat.
Yeah. How good was Brandy Love today then, guys? Mare's hurdle, absolute certainty.
Probably good enough, don't you think?
For the Coral Cup, yeah. Someone said Paul needs this to come in to get a decent camera.
It's true. It's true. We were talking about that before, Matt. For some reason, I'm purple and grainy. You know, that's what I'm like in real life.
Barney the dinosaur. Brandy Love was rusty, I agree. Good old sax.
We're going to probably do one at the end of this week, Thomas, and I'm hoping that we'll have that out maybe over the weekend. So for those that you aren't reading the comments, Thomas is just asking if we're doing any previews. Right, are we ready to go, Kev?
Hold on. There's 141 people watching.
Okay.
Smash that like. Don't, because I'll never post anything ever again. Be a waste of time.
Do we know that is the forum working okay now? Might be just worth a check to see the forum's working okay and people are getting on okay.
150, that's a lot of people, really. There's not even 150 people on the forum.
There's a hell of a lot more.
Not good ones. All the best people haven't turned up. Yeah, it seems to be working all right.
Right.
People haven't turned up. Plus, it'll take you quite a while to actually get to it. It can get on, just takes about 30 seconds. 166. How many people watched it last time?
I actually can't remember. I'm not sure. I suspect similar numbers.
Not sure I believe those numbers, Joe, to be honest.
Right, should we go?
Yeah, right, I'll mute then. Hi, everyone.
Right, thanks, guys. a few technical issues there, just you guys crashing the forum. But it's that time of the year where we all come together for the announcement of the annual Naiad. Most of you guys know the story behind it already, so I'm not going to bore you with that all over again. But I just really want to say thank you for joining me. It's a bit of annual fun for us all, and hopefully I'll try and make the time that you're taking out this evening worthwhile. But I guess it's only really worthwhile if the Naiad comes in. So there's a fair amount of work gone into trying to find the right horse, as you'd imagine. And this would be the horse from the handicaps that I'm the most confident about. Partly from the research that I've done, but also I've been digging away behind the scenes as you'd expect me to be. Look, enough waffle. I know you really want to hear the name of the horse, but I do want to give you a bit of an explanation because it's not been without a few challenges this year. It's been really hard to find a value pick that I have sufficient confidence about. The book is, you guys will all have seen the prices yesterday when the handicaps were announced. There's not a lot of value in the markets at all. If you took the first 20 horses in every one of those markets, the bookies are probably on 500% or more over rounds. So they're not taking any chances at all. And the one thing that was really apparent to me was the type of horses that you usually see in that sort of 20 to 1 to 33 to 1 bracket are being priced at mid-teens this year. So it's been much tougher than usual. I've been more cautious because of Galahad Quest last year. Obviously, the disappointment of the horse not running and the owners deciding we'd taken all the value and he took his bat and ball away. So I was a little bit more cautious this year. I just wanted to be absolutely certain that the intent is for the Naiad to run in the chosen race, which I was pretty satisfied with beforehand from the information that I had. But just as I say, from what happened last year, it just made me a little bit more cautious. And I just wanted to see that entry. Kind of regret that now because prices have started to tumble. The selection this year, when it was priced up originally, was about 25 to 1. But the best price has really tumbled significantly yesterday and today. And there's been further cuts just in the last hour and a half. I had genuinely considered abandoning, not what you guys really want to hear. Had a real think about it, but I think there's still sufficient juice in the price. And the money that's come down isn't from me letting the cat out of the bag. Quite a few of you guys have tried to find out or ask for clues and so on and so forth. And I've deliberately said nothing to anybody, even the people closest to me. So nobody has the slightest idea of the horse I'm about to select. But I have been sniffing around for information from connections and people connected. So there's a good chance that the money that has come is from connections, and there's been a bit of a ripple effect from that. But as I say, I'm certain the selection comes to this race, and I'm confident it's well fancied by the stable, and it's definitely a plan. There's been a plan for the season. As you'd expect, I've got some large amounts down myself, and that had some impact on the price coming down yesterday. As soon as I saw the selection on entries, I'm an owner, as you many of you guys will know, so I can see those live entries. So when the entry went in, I had two fairly big bets with a couple of bookmakers, and that did have a knock-on effect. So I am partly responsible, but certainly not to the extent of what's happened since. Both of those bookmakers cut their prices immediately, and as I say, in retrospect, I wish I'd gone early prior to the entries because I was fairly certain that he was coming here. What it does show is why we all need to be selective with betting when the handicap entries come out. It's very easy to be like a kid in a sweet shop. I try and keep myself disciplined because it's hard to find value now, and where there is value, it quickly disappears. And as soon as the Twitter sphere goes mad and the tipsters start, literally everything's getting tipped up, and the bookers will use any excuse to cut prices. So, look, it makes it increasingly important to coordinate the Naiad because the bookmakers do react sharply, and it's really important that we do get on at the same time. So that's the intent this evening. I suspect just being a few seconds after the announcement, the price will go completely. I mentioned I've got a good chunk of money down, and I'll be going again this evening at the same time as you guys. I'll be, probably about 3/4 of the way there in terms of my target return this evening. I think there's probably going to be value in the selection all the way down to around about the 7-1 mark anti-post. So I wouldn't necessarily put anybody off a little bit later if they haven't been on the on this podcast, the live podcast. So anybody that sees this later or picks it up on the forum or picks it up by word of mouth, I think down to 7-1 is probably fine anti-post. Before the announcement, just a quick reminder that if you disagree, there's no need to bet. I would suggest there's no reason to go overboard. It's a bit of fun, so clearly only bet what's affordable. That said, if we pull it off, it's has the potential for making a little bit of history. These collective betting coups against the bookmakers don't happen very often. But fairly surely our combined stakes are going to be pretty significant. And I think there's a fair chance that, in the next 10 minutes or so, this horse is going to go into favourite for the race. And the bookmakers won't have been taken for such large sums on one horse from a collective gamble too often. Probably actually not since the last two Naiads, if I'm really honest. But so if we pull this off and the selection wins, it'll be something we can all look back on knowing that it's the biggest group gamble of the festival, possibly any festival. That would be us. So as I said, we're about to attempt to potentially make our own piece of festival gambling history. Okay, enough talk. It's time to get on with the announcement of the Naiad. You guys need to get your phones and laptops and devices ready. And I'll tell you which bookmakers that I recommend you bet with. The prices aren't the prices that I wanted to recommend, but I still think, as I said, there's sufficient juice. The best price, 4 places, is with 888 Sport. I don't know how many people have that account available to them. But the next best, no runner, no bet, 5 places, is Bet365. So if you're a Bet365 man, that's the account you need. And then the rest are pretty much the same price. So, if you're not using either of those, then use whichever is your favoured bookmaker, I would suggest. Just for interest, whilst there isn't a massive amount of liquidity on the exchange yet, 30% of all the money on this race has come for this horse already, and only small percentages scattered around other horses. So it also suggests there might be a bit of smart money for this horse, rather than just people following whatever's blue on Oddschecker. Anyway, irrespective of the price you get on at, I genuinely believe we're still going to have value. I expect the horse to perhaps go as short as 7-1 tonight, possibly even shorter than that. As I say, I think it'll probably be the new favourite by the time we've finished. That'll probably depend on how awake the bookmakers are, if I'm really honest. Some might be asleep and could depend on who's on duty. But we may as well take what we can while we can. Okay, if you guys are loaded up, I'm not, so I still need to get something on myself. So just give me 1 second so I can get myself in shape. So this is effectively for me to take my stake to where I want it to be now. So I'm loaded up. I'm actually going to go with Unibet. Anybody that's happy to take this bet without no runner, no bet, without the no runner, no bet concession, you could actually use Unibet, who are a point bigger than the rest, which is where I'm going right now. As I say, my advice to you is no runner, no bet. I'm not going to follow my own advice just because of the information that I've got. You don't need to follow that. I've had that firsthand. You haven't. So I'm ready to go, and I'm about to press a button. So if you guys go to the Ultima market, again, I'll give you a few seconds to load up.
A few seconds of silence as well.
Okay. So I'm going to assume that you guys are ready to go. If anybody isn't, just send a quick message to say we're really struggling to get on the chat. Okay, nobody sent a message, so I'm assuming you guys are ready. So the horse in question, I'm afraid, has tumbled from 25 to 1 down to between 14s and 10s. Certainly that was the case just prior to getting on, and the horse is Nasalam. I'll come on to an explanation in a second, but the horse you want to back is Nasalam. And sadly, my bet is being reviewed by a trader, which is never a good sign. While I'm waiting for a trader to say no to me, hopefully you guys are getting on okay. I'm on. Oh, you're on. Trader says yes. So I'm now on to the stake. I'm on for a return to 2,000 points so far. My target return is 2,800 points. So I've still got a bit of work to do. Whether I actually get there, I don't know. One of the challenges I have, and I'm sure many of you guys have, is that I'm getting restrictions on not only accounts, but on the size of bets I can get on. And then there's the regularity that you can go and top up again. So, I knew I could probably get some more on there. I don't think I can get anything else on. I can probably get a little bit more on with Sky Bet tomorrow, for example. But then I think the resets happen for a week. The best person to ask for when resets happen is probably David, Saxon Warrior. David's the one that will tell you when you can get your bets on. Okay, so as I say, firstly, my apologies that he's not the price I'd hoped to announce him to be. I'd hoped to be at least sort of mid-teens.
Well, just to interrupt you, you can get 16 to 1 with Will Hill, non-runner, no bet.
Oh wow! Okay, guys, if you want to go and do that, that wasn't
just,
there before.
Well, it's just gone to 12s now.
Yeah,
just tried to get on.
That wasn't there, so they took a chance and pushed the wrong horse out. I suspect.
Yeah.
What a shame. 12 is still a good price. 12 no runner, no bet. I can't use them, unfortunately, so that doesn't help me. But some of you guys may want to use that. Okay, and I see some of you guys got boosted on Hills at 17. That's great news. Well done. Okay, so some rationale. I need to make my case. So, look, if some of you guys have busy evenings, if you're not interested in the rationale and the explanation that sits around it, and I'm going to talk about some of the other contenders in the race as well, to give you an idea of why I've come down on the side of Nasalam and not something else. Feel free to go, but hopefully at least I can give you a reasonable explanation why you've just put some money down. So let me start with saying, Nasalam has more than enough experience. As a second season chaser, they tend to do well. Novices and second season chasers will be the ones that you really want for this race. There are exceptions to that, but law of averages says that's what you're looking for. He's still pretty unexposed as a chaser, and I wanted to see him step up in trip after his run at the Paddy Power Gold Cup. His run then just screamed to me as though he just wanted further. I was a bit surprised, I think, when they entered him on New Year's Day over the same trip at Cheltenham. Particularly, look, it was over the stiffer course, I suppose, so that would help him. He was again a fast finishing third to Midnight River. I'm not sure they necessarily wanted to get quite as close as they did, but that's what it was. A lot of you guys will know that my connections to Dan Skelton's stable, and I know the high regard that they hold Midnight River in, and I know how confident they were that day. So for the selection to get within 3 lengths, I think is a good idea of just how well he might be handicapped. He, as I say, he was hitting the line pretty hard as well over the stiffer new course, 2 miles 5. So 3 miles on the old course, I think, is no problem at all. Certainly not a problem in terms of his breeding. You'd expect him to get the trip, no problem at all. And I think in terms of Mark, the combination of running in between Midnight River and Il Ridotto, who was behind him, would suggest that a blind man would think that his current mark might be quite handy, shall we say. Il Ridotto obviously went and hosed up the trials meeting subsequently. So, he split 2 extraordinarily well handicapped horses over a trip that I think is probably too short for him. As far as the trip is concerned, clearly Gary Moore agrees. This is his only entry. He's only been entered in this race. He didn't get an entry in the plays at all. Again, which might be an indicator of the noises that were made to me that was the intent. There was never an intent to go to the plate. He's also not entered in the Kim Muir, which is obviously over two furlongs further and on the stiffer course. So, whilst he could line up potentially in an easier race, Kim Muir often isn't these days. I think the 3 miles, sharper 3 miles, will suit him better anyway. And as I say, we can be absolutely certain that's the race he's going to. I think he's already acted on the new course, and we've got the big bonus that we know he acts around Cheltenham. That's just a must for me, really, for a selection like this. It's hard to remember actually that he was originally a juvenile hurdler and a very good one at that. Interesting point actually. I was looking at the Boodles earlier just to start thinking about anything that I might want to add to what I've done so far. And the thing that became really apparent to me is that the top weight in the Boodles may only be somewhere around the 133 to 135 mark. Well, Nasalam was top weight 2 years ago off 142 in the Fred Winter. He was a really, really good juvenile, but clearly off 142 and top weight, he was going to be vulnerable to those that had their marks looked after. But to get to 142 as a juvenile prior to the festivals takes some doing. So he was a really good juvenile. He was novice chasing as a 4 or 5 year old, so he gained experience early in the season, and that season is normally a really tricky one for juveniles. But he was very good as a novice chaser. He wasn't out of the first 2 in some really good races, and he's been pitched into handicaps this season as a 6 year old, and some very good ones clearly. So he's run well every time, but he's been looking like there's a target in mind, as I said. And this is it. He's on a really nice mark. He's talented, and for me, he just looks perfect for the race. He's got sufficient course experience, and he's been racing at the right level. So I just love his profile for the race. I think it's also worth saying that Gary Moore's very capable of getting horses to the festival in peak condition. He's done it several times now, and he's also pretty good at laying one out. And I always think there's always a bit of context needed around this. We're so used to the likes of Willie Mullins, Nicky Henderson, Gordon Elliott sending, having lots of winners at the festival. And these smaller trainers, it's pretty hard for them to compete with these guys. But Gary Moore's got a pretty decent record. He's got a very good record around Cheltenham with, a limited number of runners. You tend to know when a Gary Moore horse is liked and fancied because there's money for it. And, whilst I've not been able to advise at the bigger price that I really wanted to, there's certainly been money for this horse. And, they are a shrewd stable. Look, with any handicap selection, you've got to take into consideration a number of factors: track, trip, form, trainer form, campaign, and ideally what you want is the best handicapped horse. And, he really does tick all those boxes for me. I've got sufficient doubt about every other horse in the race that I believe he's going to line up, and he's my clear number 1. Now, look, some of you guys will have already backed other horses in this race when the entries came out yesterday, and I'm never going to poo-poo anybody else's bets or thought processes or reasons for backing horses. But clearly, what I am going to do now is, make the case that those horses won't beat Nasalam. So, there are always going to be dangers, and it's part of my process to assess them. And I've got a handful of horses that I consider as dangers. I don't think it's going to be an overly deep race, and already this far out, I'm quite happy. Of the 63 entries, there are only a handful really of realistic contenders, and those contenders fit into one of four profiles for me. Those that came via the Newbury Gold Cup and Classic Chase route, which is now starting to become a well-worn route. Previous returners, horses that have run well in the race before, have a decent record in this race. Horses on an improvement curve, so relatively lightly raced horses that have been improving through the season. And also novices have a good record in the race. So I'm going to try and examine them by each of those profiles. 335 is a horse that came from the Newbury Warwick route. 150, I suppose, looks like a feasible mark for a horse that's running some decent races. You'd forgive him last time at Warwick. I think he got a bit stuck in the mud. So he's a genuine contender, but he is inconsistent, and he's been around long enough now for us to get a handle on his form. I think he can run well. I think he can place. But I think there's going to be other less exposed horses than him. You need to be ahead of your mark to win this race, really, or an absolute specialist that runs particularly well. And he doesn't really fit that profile for me. But as I say, I couldn't discount him running into a place. The returners who could contend, there's a few of them actually. Corot Rambler obviously won the race last year. Oscar Elite ran a big race recently. Our Power and T Clipper, who finished in the places last year. And the Naiad from 2 years ago, Happy Go Lucky, is also a returner. So 5 returners that you could take into consideration. So just to pick those off one by one, last year's winner, Corot Rambler, obviously has to be a consideration, but are they really going to give away a Grand National to have a hard race here? There's a few clues, really. He had preps in both January and February last year leading up to the festival, and this time he hasn't run since last November. So this is basically a prep for Aintree, and up until recently he wasn't even coming here. He was going to prep somewhere else, but they've just decided fairly late on that the gap's about right to use as his prep from the National. So with this not really been his target, I'm actually happy to pass on him. That's a pretty harsh cut, I know, for a horse that won quite well last year, but he's up in weight. He's up 7 pounds from last year, I think it was. And he's not going to be race sharp like he was last year. And this isn't his target. So, that's not the kind of profile I really like for a horse that I'm going to be confident about winning. But again, we know he runs well around there. He'll go around there on muscle memory, and he will probably run a decent race. T Clipper and Our Power both run decent race in the minor places last year. You question how much is left in their marks for improvement. Again, both I think can probably place, and they're likely to probably finish somewhere near each other. Our Power's actually entered up at Kempton on Saturday and looks to have been held back for this season. So I think Kempton's probably his prep for this. It feels like this race is a plan, and I think he's going to be taken seriously. If the ground is decent, then he's a definite contender. He wants lively ground. He's going to be his best there. And that Cheltenham double's been done before, so he's respected. Particularly given he's got a light weight if it doesn't get ruined on Saturday. But I think that will be a prep, as I say. I wouldn't be backing him on Saturday. You'd want him to be, if you're interested in him, you'd be wanting him to be a running on 3rd, 4th, 5th kind of thing, and no better than that. He's a better chance if he doesn't win, and if he does win, I think that diminishes his chance from this. So with regards T-Clip, it's actually worth mentioning Nasalam, because Nasalam stuffed him by 30 lengths when they were both novices. And there were no obvious excuses for T-Clipper that day. It just looks to me that Nasalam is the much better horse. So I can't see why T-Clipper would get any closer to Nasalam than T-Clipper did to Coral Rambler last year. And it's quite an interesting little comparison to make, because if you make an assumption that something's got to run to the same level or better that Coral Rambler did last year, it gives some encouragement that Nasalam could or possibly should. So the other thing about T-Clipper, he's possibly starting to look a little exposed. There can't be an awful lot of juice left in his mark, and there's no real reason why I'll run a better race than he did last year. Perhaps he could jump a bit better, but again, probably place prospects at best. I really can't not talk about Happy Go Lucky, of course, because we were really unlucky. We hit the bar with him 2 years ago. Without a couple of mistakes, you'd be fairly confident he was the best horse in the race, and we'd have landed it. He was just unlucky. He went on to Aintree and dotted up, didn't he? So over stiffer fences, ironically. And I think he can run a big race this year. He's not much higher in the weights than 2 years ago. And there was part of me that's, the sentimental part of me wanted to put him up as the Naiad again this year. But with something like this, there's no room for sentiment. You've got to make some hard cuts. But his run at the rehearsal chase at Newcastle, after being off for a long time, beating only 4 lengths by Long Press, who was vying, for close to favouritism for the Gold Cup, is a particularly good piece of form. He then followed up and ran over 2.5 miles on New Year's Day at Cheltenham, just really looking like they were getting a race into his legs and not wanting to do anything damage his mark. But again, a bit like Coral Rambler, I can't help but think that Kim Bailey's got his eyes on the Grand National, and I don't think he'll want to peak him twice in the space of 5 weeks. So whilst he rates a danger, and I could be wrong, he could run a really big race. On balance, I wouldn't put him up as the winner. Oscar Elite, there's been a lot of money from him in the last week. He ran a big race the other day at Ascot, so he has to be a danger. He's got an attractive looking mark. It's hard to say how far ahead of it he could be, though. And I think of the returners, he's probably the one that's most likely to spoil the party. It's also worth considering he also came via the Newbury Gold Cup, which again is often a good trial for this race. And he might be one to have a saver on potentially. But there's risk with him. He can be really clumsy. He can get a little bit loud in his races, can get a bit behind. I don't mean behind in handicaps, but ends up with quite a lot of work to do at the end of his races in big fields. And the other risk actually is he's a bleeder, and he's been known to do it twice now. That's not a horse I'm going to have a big bet on. And I also can't help thinking, that £4 he went up for beating 2 horses that didn't run their race at Ascot might be a bit harsh, for winning a nothing 3-runner affair. He hadn't done a whole lot prior to this season. You'd have wanted to see him do something to have any sort of chance in this race, I suppose. But, on balance, I don't think it's a profile of a horse that I think is going to win this race. Again, could run a big race, having said that. Then I'm on to the improvers. The only one really you'd probably look at as an improver this season is Into Overdrive, Walford's horse. Decent horse, but I think he's a horse that's still going to find another 7, maybe even £10 to be able to win this race. And his curve has got to stop at some point. It also puts me off that he's got no course form. That's a big thing for me for this race. And he's also much worse off than the run against Happy Go Lucky in the rehearsal chase that Long Press won. So Happy Go Lucky is massively better off because of the amount that Into Overdrive has gone up. So I'd have Happy Go Lucky. I'll be confident to say that with a clean round, Happy Go Lucky will finish in front of Into Overdrive. So I can't consider him. I suspect a few people will be on Lord Accord. I think he will be popular, and I think he probably continues to be popular, particularly because of his lightweight and because of the course form this season. He's also a good trends horse. He's running the Newbury Gold Cup again, whatever it's called, this Coral Gold Cup or Ladbroke Gold Cup, or let's just call it the Hennessy, shall we? And also another trend, the bizarre fact that a couple of previous winners prepped in the Cleve Hurdle just as he just has. But I can't get past just how far he was beaten in both races. He was pretty much stuffed. You can argue that they didn't want to do anything about his mark, but you don't need to run in races all season getting battered, do you? The key to his chance is probably his other two runs this season, though. He was second in the Badger Isles at Wincanton, and he split Frodon and Captain Ord. And then he won at Cheltenham in October when he beat the Wolf and Captain Cattistock. Captain Ord obviously advertised the form the other day at the weekend. He was a good winner at the weekend. But Captain Ord hasn't really been running on his merits all season. I'd be fairly confidently say that. And also, Frodon looks a shadow of himself, doesn't he? Don't think Frodon's been running anything up to his previous form. So I'm not totally convinced about that form. And the Cheltenham race, he beat the Wolf and Captain Cattistock. Well, look, quite frankly, if the Wolf and Captain Cattistock ran in this race, they'd be beaten 30 lengths. I'm not. I think I'd be looking through rose-tinted spectacles if I put him forward and use that form. That's probably the way I'd best describe it. He can run well. He's off a lightweight, but again, he doesn't feel like a winner in weight in this race to me. He just looks like a 135 to 140 horse, and he's running off 137 here. I don't think that'll be good enough. So as I said, I'm not writing him off, but I don't see him as the winner. There are two novices that I took into consideration. They're not the only ones, but these are the two that I took into consideration, and that's Monbeg Genius and Beauport. Monbeg Genius, just because he's unexposed and is improving, and he's racking up a series of ones to his name. But he's been running in fairly easy range. I think the other thing that I took into consideration is that John Joe's had a good record in this race over the years, but this horse I don't think really fits the profile. But I can't ignore the fact he's unexposed, and I don't know where his curve ends. I just see no proof and evidence so far that what he's done would be good enough. I do have one of the pieces of form. Actually, I rated quite highly, so he could run a big race. But again, there's not enough evidence for me to really take him as a winner. The novice that I do think is the bigger danger, though, is Beauport of Twiston Davis's. He was a really good hurdler. He was rated high 140s. I think he was 148 at his best, and that's comparable to some very good horses. He's unexposed over fences, and he comes into the race with a profile I actually do quite like. I seriously considered him as an option. He won really nicely on his chase debut, and his prep for this was against the Real Whacker over 2.5 on New Year's Day, and obviously the Real Whacker, is a second or third favourite for the Brown Advisory. And, that was a horse they were talking about sending to the Gold Cup. So it's decent form. His form over fences so far has been over 2.5 miles. And again, from a trends perspective, that doesn't necessarily fit. But, I'm satisfied that 3 miles isn't a problem because he's already run particularly well in a 3-mile handicap hurdle at Sandown, the Grade 3 handicap, where he finished second to Green Book, only just beaten. So, I've no problem with him with the trip. And the other thing that tells you, there's no issue with him running in a big field handicap. And the other thing is he's bred to want it. So it's possible he could go to Kinmuir. He's got a rating that will get him into Kinmuir comfortably. I'm not quite sure who Twister would put up on him. But I suspect they wouldn't go all the way up to 3 miles too, and then more likely to come to 3 miles here. And I'm actually going to do the unusual thing of when I'm doing a Naiad to recommend a saver on Beauport for the race. I think he's currently around the 16-1 mark, and if you haven't considered him, I think he's actually worth a bit of a saver. Anyway, That's it. There may be one or two horses that you guys are interested in that I haven't mentioned. I haven't mentioned them because I don't think they will place. I'm sure there are some cases that could be made, and you guys could perhaps make those cases for those horses on the thread on the forum. But because obviously, sadly, you don't get the chance to do that when I'm doing a live podcast. But I'm happy to answer anything on the forum and come back. I know I've been a little less active this year, but I'll make a point of doing so. So that's it. That's this year's Naiad, guys. To say, apologies that it's not the big sort of 25, 33 to 1 juicy type prices, but I do believe there's plenty of juice in the current price. I do think there is every chance that he's going to go off much shorter than the price that we backed him at. As I say, in terms of the handicaps, he's the horse that I would be the most confident about. One final thing. Festival's coming up in 2.5 weeks' time. We're all in this together. I just wish everybody a really good festival. I hope you take the bookies to the cleaners, and I hope we take the bookies to the cleaners tonight. Cheers, guys.
Thanks very much, Paul. Right, we'll have a little catch up now. We'll be doing a podcast on Friday, like I think you said. So we'll put that up, and we'll see you all there. Thanks very much, guys.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Cheers, guys.